What's going on, guys? No flashy intro or anything like that today. As you can tell by the title and thumbnail, fairly serious topic. Anybody who's seen their Facebook or Instagram feed or watched any of the mainstream news anytime soon or in the last couple of days, you know the situation. And so I figured I'd make this video because honestly, I've thought about making this particular video for a long time. I just never felt like it was appropriate, but this kind of feels different with the two back-to-back shootings in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio. Things just kind of feel different about this one. I know it's not our typical just like, funny, kind of irreverent humor and, all sorts of stuff like that. It's not really on brand particularly, but this is something that I feel like there's a gap in the conversation. So this is not going to be talking points. If you're here for the traditional like pro-gun, rah-rah, probably not the right video. But this is something that I think is missing from the national discourse that I kind of wanted just to throw out there. And so let's go ahead and dive right into it. So like the title and all that says, this is a pretty unpopular opinion on the entire mass shooting debate, gun violence debate, all that stuff. It's not necessarily unpopular because I don't think it's wrong, but it's it's actually backed up by quite a lot of logic and fact. But I think it's unpopular because a lot of people don't like thinking about it, and it's not brought up a lot. So it sounds brash, and it's going to sound really cynical. I promise you, it's not. It's just data driven. This is something that I think more people need to consider. So don't think this is coming from a place that lacks empathy. If this sounds a little harsh, but the unpopular opinion is that with these, terrible mass shootings that are, have happened for a good little while, you should be really glad that some of these people are using guns to do this. And I know how that sounds. That sounds terrible on the outset, but I do have a reason behind it. And if you haven't already clicked away and you actually want to hear it, I'm going to get right into that. Now, let me just preface this by saying what I'm talking about in this video is not, garden variety gun violence, as far as like people getting, shot outside of a bar or suicides or, stuff like that. It's not what I'm talking about at all. That's a totally different conversation. This is simply referring to the people who decide they want to take a gun and go out and end as much human life as possible. That's purely what this video is about. So it's undeniable that weapons like AR-15s and AKs and things like that are definitely very deadly instruments. They can be used as great tools for defense, and they can be used as vile instruments of just death. And that's just the reality of it. So the question comes around to, and I'm not blind to that, I probably know more than the average person what exactly that means. But I guess that brings me back around to, why do I think that we are fortunate that these people are using guns? What it comes down to is this. You hear a lot about how people can, Cain killed Abel with a rock. People have been killing each other for a long time, knives, whatever, things like that. I don't think that holds a lot of water when we're talking about these mass shooting events, just because, it's just undeniable. You can do more. You can do a lot more destruction a lot quicker with an AR-15 with extended magazines than you can with a knife. It's a fact. But here's the problem. An AR-15, or let's just say any, I hate to use the term because it's their term, but assault weapon, because you guys know what I'm talking about. They're more or less pinpoint precision instruments as far as what you are pointing at when you pull that trigger is what you're going to hit. Things get a lot worse when people use more blanket ways of just trying to cause generic death and destruction, because those pinpoint instruments are used traditionally, how they're supposed to be used, as a pinpoint instrument. You have one person in particular, or select people that you're going after, or you're doing target shooting, or you're hunting, or whatever. That's what that's for. Now, what happens when you take a truck? What happens when you take bombs, things like that? When, you start to do the, and I hate to be crude again, but to whom it may concern style of approach to ending human life. That's where things get really scary. And I've got some firm examples here. So let me actually get into the data behind this, so I'm not just rambling to you about, opinion. This is actually something that statistically I can back up. So the deadliest mass shooting event in the United States, done by one lone person that was, for whatever reason, mentally driven to the edge to kill as many people indiscriminately as he could, was obviously the Las Vegas shooting that killed 58 people and wounded a bunch of others. And I would say it's fair to say, based on what was found in the hotel rooms of the photos, very well prepared, probably about, because he was in a stationary position overlooking a concert. I mean, that was about the worst case scenario as far as, firearms are probably concerned. Killed about 58 people. The average shooting that you see on the news, as far as what's considered a mass shooting, rarely ever does it actually break 20 people killed. Usually it's just a dozen or so, which I don't mean to devalue the tragedy of these events when they happen. Obviously, that's, it's a terrible thing one way or the other, but just statistically speaking, not usually something that more than 15 people or so are actually killed by. Now let's contrast that when people use other methods and actually plan out an attack of that style, but they're a little smarter about it. First one that comes to mind is the Oklahoma City bombing, and that was a more targeted attack. That was Timothy McVeigh taking out the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City with fertilizer and a rented U-Haul. That was 168 people killed, and I believe that was with half the building empty. That was, and he almost got away with it. He wasn't there on site when it happened. I mean, like, it just, he was able to drive away. And so that right there is triple the casualty count of the worst mass shooting in U.S. history. And that was done with fertilizer in a truck. There was the attack recently with the truck in Nice, France. Guy basically rents a giant truck and plows through a city street full of people that are celebrating Bastille Day. Kills 86 people with a truck. Going back a little bit, you can do the Bath school massacre. That was 44 people killed by dynamite. By one lone guy, and that's, I mean, that beats the worst school shooting in U.S. history, and a guy just showed up with a bunch of dynamite. It's crazy to see the destructive power of what people like this do when they just, it's scary to me how easy some of the stuff is to do if you put just a little modicum of effort to it. Like 20, 30 years ago, the Happy Land nightclub fire was started by an arsonist with what was like, it was a makeshift Molotov cocktail. Burned the building down and killed 87 people. A lot of them were trampled to death by each other, and then they burned or suffocated. And it was all over a bad breakup with a girlfriend, and he just wanted to just take out the entire place. That sort of stuff is so easy, it's so doable. Every single thing that I just listed was far worse than anything that could be done, or that has been done, with a firearm with these mass shooters. At least, apples to apples. Far worse. Far worse. And that's what makes it so difficult, is because the knee-jerk reaction when you see some stuff like this is you immediately look, what caused this? I know that term, mental health, gets thrown around a lot when stuff like this comes up. People, they don't want to blame the guns, so they go straight to mental health, which I do believe is a definitely a better place to start, but nobody really elaborates on it because it's a complicated issue. It's to think about what drives a human being to the ultimate nihilistic pinnacle, where not only do they not value human life, but they want to spread that around like a disease to other people and either show people how little it matters or hurt them as much as possible before taking themselves out of it. That's dark. That's really dark. And a lot of people don't like thinking about it, and certain people just, it's not something that's easy to talk about. And what's really easy is, why are we keep letting this happen? Let's take the guns. That's easy. That's a very easy solution, but I don't think it's going to solve anything. I think it's actually going to make it worse. Because if you read it, if you don't come out of this video with anything else, do some homework. And if you really, don't do this if you're squeamish, but read what these people wrote. Read what the Columbine students wrote. Actually do 30 minutes of digging into what these people actually had to say. because people say all sorts of stuff about why they did it. Read their exact words. And for a lot of this stuff, it's a very rare but creepy glimpse into the depths of where an action of that magnitude comes from. And I think if more people did that and actually put just even a modicum of thought into it, they would realize that putting a 5-day wait period on buying an AR-15 is not going to stop a damn thing. So like I said, this is kind of an unpopular opinion because I think it's difficult to talk about. And I think it takes a lot of being serious about this sort of stuff. And it's not a pleasant thing to think about for a long amount of time. And it's not a pleasant thing to talk about at the dinner table. And it's not as catchy if you put it on Facebook. And people on the left and people on the right aren't as quick to agree with you right off the bat. And you get that dopamine kick of being accepted in society for your beliefs, that you're right and you feel validated. It's difficult. It's hard. But I think it's something that we need to start talking about more, because it feels like the dichotomy of politics between right and left both seem to kind of tacitly agree that the gun used contributed to the death count. And that's true. But not in the way I think most people think. I presented a lot of problems here. I really just kind of thrown out a lot of issues with things. And like I said, I'm not a psychologist. I can read like anybody else can. I'm not an expert on this stuff. But I think it's seriously worth thinking about. I don't feel obligated to share this with my audience. Like I said, I'm sorry, but this is really off-brand. This is really kind of not my thing. But I'm not one of those people that thinks that I owe it to the public to prophesize about my opinion. I don't necessarily think it's my place, and that's why I've never talked about this before. But I hate seeing the political discourse happen in the way it does, and people jump to every other direction because it's convenient, I guess. And I don't think it's done maliciously. I think everybody's trying to do the right thing. I just want to steer that in what I think the right direction is. And I think that this would probably help out with that. So that's why I'm kind of doing this. But anyway, as far as the solutions, I'm not qualified to talk about that sort of thing. I think this is something that we need to actually start listening to psychologists that are tackling this issue a little bit more. I think that's probably beneficial. But if I can be so bold as to stick my nose where it doesn't belong, I really think we would benefit as a society with a little bit of a return to traditional masculinity. Allow men to be men, allow competition to be a real thing. You hear about it a lot from older generations about how this is the participation trophy generation, snowflakes and things like that. And I think it's overblown, but I think there's some underlying merit to that. But you have these, let's face it, most of the shooters that we're talking about are the traditional stereotype white men, young white men. And I think the underlying problem with that is just and like I said, this is not just I think, it's if you read what they wrote, it's nihilism. It's people feeling trapped. And frankly, I think a lot of it is to do with the fact that if you look at, a lot of them are from broken homes. They don't have a strong father figure, which, by the way, statistically, just a little psychological thing for you, there's strong links to the presence of a father figure being where a lot of young men determine their sense of empathy, which seems extremely relevant in this situation when we're talking about not being able to feel bad about ending other human lives just for the sake of ending them. So I think that's pertinent. We are setting men up to fail biologically. Young people, young men, I think we're setting them up for failure and telling them as a society this is the way it should be, and then turning them into weak men that frankly women don't like, and just it's a lot of other issues. It's a bad thing, and we're doing it for the sake of progress. But take a hard look, and I think this will continue to age fairly well. Take a hard look at the types of shooters and tell me you don't see a pattern with that. Not all the time. Nothing's ever certain all the time. It could be a million other things, but I think that might be a great place to look. So sorry for the dark video, guys. Like I said, I really don't like doing stuff like this. This is a video that every time something like this happens, I think about doing it and then I think better of it. But hopefully this was valuable for you. If nothing else, I hope I didn't waste your time, and I hope I gave you something to think about, or that you may have been driven to look something up that maybe you learned something from. But I appreciate it, guys. We'll be returning to the regular scheduled programming, and I guess I will see you guys in the next video. Thanks.